set this up so we're on YouTube. For anybody who wants the lecture later. This classroom is always so warm.
You want me to open the window?
Kate was here, but he left them back.
Okay, yeah. You're welcome to open the window, Jill. As long as that won't make anybody too cold. Yeah, this classroom is always warm.
Chilly.
Okay. So I know that this week there is a fair bit of reading assigned in that materials handbook, but some of it is review. They cover again a few of the topics we covered about water chemistry and corrosion again in that reading. So it's not all brand new information. So hopefully nobody is struggling too much with the fact that there was a large section of reading assigned.
Are we in volume 2 of reactor plant materials? Or I can look if you don't know.
Yeah. So metals should be volume 1, module 2 or 3. I'll have to pull it up because we're.
Oh, I can pull it up. I just thought maybe you just...
Today we're starting our discussion on metals, which is the material science, volume 1, module 1, and module 2 is what we're working on right now.
It's all volume 2, it looks like.
It's volume 1, module 1 and 2.
In reactor plant materials?
Of the material science handbook, yep.
The DOE.
Mm-hmm.
This says volume 2, unless I'm really reading it wrong.
Okay, so this is the chemistry handbook.
Oh, you were in material science?
Yeah,
I
so,
gotcha,
so
I
if you
gotcha.
go back to this course, we have chemistry, material. So the topic we started Monday is in this chemistry handbook.
Mm-hmm.
And then today we're starting in materials science volume 1. So everything we've done up to this point has been from the chemistry handbooks, which is why I actually want to make chemistry a prerequisite for this course so that I don't have to review a lot of that chemistry stuff or teach it. We would just review it shortly, and then we can talk a little bit more about the actual materials stuff. And Ryan and I spent 2 hours over Zoom yesterday making a bunch of changes for the program going forward. So we're splitting it into the 2 tracks.
Mm-hmm.
So even though it's not going to be on your guys's catalog year, you would be able to make some appeals to start using some of those changes. So for example, the careers class, I'm only making people take twice instead of 3 times. So if you guys want, you can all submit a request to not have to take it a 3rd time. So, you know, 1 less hour for you somewhere.
I think it's a little late for us.
Yeah, that's
Probably needed most next semester.
So I actually think that this semester is the best semester for the 2nd years to take it because job openings are going to start in February. So this semester, we want you to practice interviewing. We want you to write your resume. And then I want you to not have to take that class so you can actually fit some scheduled interviews into your semester, right? Because they're going to do them on school days, right? So
who would we appeal to?
Phil can tell you how to do that process. There's a couple of you have done it a few times with like taking credit for 1 course to meet a requirement and stuff. So there's a process where you just write in and say, hey, this is the current requirements in the program. It wasn't the requirement in my catalog year, but I would like to apply it to me. Because I know you guys already have super full semesters. And then we're going to add that glove box and hot cells manipulators class. We're getting someone, I'm hiring someone from MFC to come teach it. So if you're somebody who is not thinking that you prefer to be in a reactor control room, you can substitute that for the reactor theory class and do that as a Friday lab. But we'll have to, you guys will have to go through a process of appealing. And I should say, this is assuming we get everything approved and in place, like we're hoping for next semester. If it doesn't get approved and started next semester, you'll just have to finish with the requirements because we haven't updated them yet. But just so you guys know, some changes coming to the program that I think will be super awesome. And if we get them in place in time, you can certainly appeal to be under those changes if it benefits you. But I'm super excited for the glove box and manipulators class. And I'm super excited to have the class down at the reactor. We're actually making both of those, which will be awesome. So Premier Technologies has a set of manipulators that we are in the process of getting. They need to be refurbished. They're offering to do it. And we don't know how much they're going to donate versus how much we need to purchase and when exactly we can fit that into the budget. But we have the hot cell, or sorry, we have the glove box. So we're going to for sure start with that, and we'll talk about hot cells and manipulators. And then hopefully when we get the manipulators here, we'll be able to do both hands-on, both components. So, but either way, we're going to for sure start with the glove box next semester, which will be super.
Clarify again. I see what you guys are talking about. You said chemistry, volume 1?
So chemistry volume 2 is what we talked about Monday and the assigned reading, because it's a big chunk. Today we're starting to talk about metals, but I think that assigned reading for you guys comes next week, I believe. Let me check. Yeah. Next week you start the reading on metals. So we're introducing the topic, but the reading and the quiz is next week, because we're going to talk about metals this week and next week because it's an important topic and it's got some depth. Okay, now that we've covered all that, let's do attendance real quick. Caden?
Present.
Haley, I believe there is a quiz. It's just on the chemistry volume. Thank you, Caden.
Me neither. There's a thermal quiz up.
Let's see. There may not have been a quiz scheduled.
Oh, that's okay. I'm not
I don't think there
saying
wasn't
we
any
need one
assignments.
or anything.
Okay. Let me just double check the syllabus real quick.
Simply focusing on the material.
Yeah, no, we had an exam, so there's not a quiz. We just had an assessment in this class. So. Oh, I think we're a little bit, I think the syllabus is a little off though, because it has us talking about what we talked about Monday on the syllabus more than it does on Moodle. So I'll get that fixed in the syllabus. Joe is here. So there's no quiz, Haley, for materials this week. Marcus? Great. Porter? Great. Patel is here. Lynette is here. Sam?
I'm here. I also had a question for after class. So
Okay. Jack?
Good morning.
Good morning. Kyle's here. Amber? Awesome. Jennifer? You online, Jennifer? Nope. Okay. pull up the presentation. We'll start talking about metals.
We'll talk about polymorphism first.
We're going to talk about bonding and structure.
Are you recording this?
I am, and it's on YouTube. It's live. I remembered to do that at the start. I don't know why the video quit. Sorry, guys. Go here. There we go. Okay. Everyone online see the slides?
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. So we're going to start talking about metals. Metals make up some of the most important materials in a reactor. The pressure vessel is metal. The fuel clad is metal. There are some metallic fuels, even though it's much more common to have a ceramic fuel. All of the support structures inside the pressure vessel are metal. All of our piping is metal. So there is a tremendous amount of metal at a nuclear power plant, and it's in some very sensitive and important to safety applications. So we're going to start today by talking a little bit, just one slide, reviewing those metallic bonds. You guys all did pretty well with that on the test, and understanding the difference between ionic, covalent, and metallic. But we're just going to state it again. Then we're going to talk about the structure of the metal grains and the idea of a grain boundary. And once we understand how those fit together in the metal, all the descriptions of the issues we have to worry about with metals, you're going to understand what's actually happening at the structure that makes those issues a concern. Okay? And we're going to try to have some time for those of you who are in class to do a little bit hands-on. I actually have a crystalline modeling kit so that we can kind of see some of the pictures in actual format, because I know some of you have said repeatedly that putting it in your hands really makes a difference. So, okay. So just as a review, metallic bond. The atoms do not share or exchange electrons and bond together, right? So it's not ionic, where they exchange it. It's not covalent, where they share it and it orbits both. Instead, many electrons are more or less free to move throughout the metal and are kind of group shared throughout the structure of those atoms, right? You've got all the metal atoms, and they've all got electrons moving through like a sea. Exactly. And this property allows the electron to interact with many different fixed atoms. And because the electrons can move around in that sea, like Lynette said, that metal is now ductile and malleable. You can shape it, you can roll it, you can make sheets and wire and all sorts of different metallic materials, because we have both rigidity in our fixed atoms and flexibility in our moving electrons, right? So metal just has a series of very unique and wonderful properties that cause it to be widely useful, which is why it's chosen for so many applications in a power plant. Okay, in addition to metallic bonds, At the atomic level, metals are also crystals. Okay? What that means, a crystal has atoms that are arranged in a three-dimensional array called a lattice. So one of the unique properties of a metal is that because it has this crystalline structure, we know the format that the atoms are going to arrange themselves in order to accomplish that sharing of electrons. They're going to be in a very predictable shape and arrangement. And based on the type of shape or arrangement each metals prefer, we have a definite set of properties that we will know and will group metals alike. They will behave the same way. They will be excellent at high temperatures or low temperatures or in caustic environments based on how this structure influences their properties. Okay? Couple properties of crystals. That lattice is going to have a regular repeating configuration in all directions. So we're going to have at the atomic level throughout the entire piece of metal this repeating structure, which means if we get stress in a certain part of this lattice that starts to cause a deformation, we're going to have a weakness, right? Because we've now broken into our very strong repeating lattice structure in that crystal. So one of the things with metals that we want to avoid is the kind of stress points that would break up this strong lattice structure, right? So as we start learning about stress and creep in metals, we're going to see why that's of such concern, because once we start a little break in that lattice, as it spreads, the property that makes metal strong suddenly disintegrates, and you get very weak problems with weakness.
Sorry, you said creep.
Creep, yes. We will define that, but it's essentially pulling apart those grain boundaries and then having that slowly spread through the metal. A group of particles from one part of a crystal has exactly the same geometric relationship as a group from any other part of the same crystal. So once you understand the structure, it's going to be uniform across the whole metal. And there are some ways that we can manipulate this. Metals have phases, alpha phase, gamma phase, different temperatures correspond to different phases, and you can have slight changes in your structure because of that, but it follows a very uniform set of rules for that structure change. And it's not like different parts of the metal are going to be different. You have great uniformity across that crystal. And it resists change, right? Because it's all in a configuration it likes, and then it's the same across the whole material. So there's no real room for it to change or move. That crystalline structure is what controls the strength, ductility, density, conductivity, and shape of whatever metal we're dealing with, right? So all of these properties are known for a metal because we know what crystalline structure the metal has. So before we ever put a metal in a stressful environment, like a radiation field, like high temperature or high flow, we already know all of these properties, and we can determine what types of metals are then suitable based on analyzing these properties to fit within whatever conditions we have, right? So metals are extremely predictable because we know the atomic structure. We then know how that influences every one of these properties. Okay? That's another reason that there's such a common choice for use in power plants, is there's very little mystery about what they're going to do, right? Solutions, liquids, a lot of times what they're going to do is anybody's guess. It's how they feel that day, right? the majority of our criticality accidents deal with uranium in solution because solutions always do what people don't expect. Metals don't change. Once you know this, you can plug them into a place and they're going to be exactly like that at the atomic level throughout the whole material. Extremely safe. Okay? So, there are 3 common basic crystal patterns associated with metals. There are more complex crystal patterns that some metals can get to, and there's some uncommon crystal structures that different crystalline materials can use. But associated with metals, there's 3 common basic formats, okay? They are body-centered cubic, face-centered cubic, and hexagonal close packed. Have you guys ever, in any chemistry classes or physics classes, ever talked about these crystal structures? This is new info? Okay. Okay. So we're going to define each one of these. We're going to talk about a couple example metals. And then starting Friday and continuing through next week, we're going to talk about how these different structures affect the properties of the metal and affect how those metals respond to various types of stress in various environments. Okay? So, body-centered cubic. Essentially, you have 8 atoms that make up the corners, there should be one drawn right here, of a cube, and then 1 atom in the center of the body. Okay? So it's 8 corners plus 1 center. This type of structure is seen in lithium, sodium, potassium, chromium, barium, vanadium, and then the alpha phase of iron. And we're going to talk about what these phases mean, but essentially at different temperatures, certain metals can actually have different structures. Just like water at different temperatures can have the phase vapor, liquid, ice. Our metals can kind of do something similar, even though they're all still metal. So we have metal phases. Sodium potassium is the most common liquid metal coolant mixture used in reactors. And it bonds together well because at the atomic level, it's the same structure. So it's very easy to take a body-centered cubic potassium grain and put in a potassium grain that's body-centered cubic, right? Because they're all going to bond together the same way. Chromium is used in some alloys in the reactor internals, and then barium and vanadium are used in nuclear medicine for some applications. And then tungsten is very expensive, but it has some very nice high temperature properties. It can do some pretty unique things in those applications, but you're going to rarely see it used. The biggest application in reactors of body-centered cubic structures are some of our iron in our steel alloys, and then those reactors that are cooled by sodium, potassium, or sometimes just sodium. But those are the biggest applications. Okay. Face-centered cubic is essentially 8 atoms at the corners and then 6 on each face of the cube, right? So you've got a cube, each side of it has an atom in the middle, and then there's one at each corner. This is aluminum, copper, nickel, the gamma phase of iron. So iron can change shape based on its phase, and then gold and silver. So you're going to see a lot of aluminum and nickel in the alloys, in our structure materials, and in our fuel clad inside of a reactor. And then as we get to higher temperatures, the iron in our steel alloys will be more likely to be in this structure than the alpha phase iron. Okay, last one. Hexagonal close pack consists of 3 layers of atoms. Okay, so first there's going to be 6 atoms at the corners of a hex. Then on top of that, there's going to be a layer of atoms at each one of those junctions. So essentially, you're going to have 6 and then 3, and then you're going to have a top layer that's 6 again. Okay? And that middle layer, the atoms are nestled in between the junctions of the 6. And I've got a picture in just a second, but I want to kind of describe this. And they're all sitting right on top of each other. They're not spaced out at the corners of the cube. They are close packed. Okay? This would be cobalt, cadmium, zinc, and our alpha face of titanium. Cadmium is an excellent neutron absorbing material, and it is occasionally used in control rods or in poison in fuel storage racks. So you'll make your metal and you'll put a layer of cadmium in the middle to ensure that you can put your fuel rods closer together, like in a spent storage pool, without having your criticality. So it may not be in the hottest applications or the highest radiation fields, but it is an extremely important material in the nuclear industry because of its neutron absorbing properties. So let's look at what that hexagonal close pack looks like. Okay, so we have right here our bottom layer that's in a hex. And I think I said 6, didn't I? 7.
Looking down.
Yep, we're looking down. Then we're going to put our 3 at each one of those junctions, right on top. Then we're going to put another layer of 7 in a hex. So now if we look sideways, it's 6, 3, 6 in a close packed hexagonal arrangement. And like I said, for those of you who are in class, and those of you who are online, next time you're in the classroom, I'll leave this kit on the resource shelf and you guys can kind of build these and look at them, because I think the pictures are good, but for those of you who struggle to translate this in your mind to 3 dimensions, the little kit lets you really look at the differences in the structure. Okay, so metals are formed of grains or regions of continuous crystal lattice surrounded by our grain boundary. So this is an extremely powerful microscope that took a picture of the atomic structure of a metal. So these regions here, there's a picture in the Dewey Handbook also. I think the picture in the Dewey Handbook kind of sucks. I think this one's better. So this is continuous metal crystal lattice structure. This is the boundary where those pieces of lattice fit together. So we have our grain and our grain boundary. Yeah, Joe.
Do you think that picture has been highlighted to, like with dark, to show the boundaries, or is that just what it would look like?
No, that's what it looks like. That is just a good quality camera hooked up to a powerful, probably scanning electron microscope. And the picture in the Dewey Handbook is just a drawing of this. So I really wish that they'd used an actual picture, because there's tons of Dewey labs that do work in materials research that can produce these pictures. Okay. When we talk about grain, remember, that's our metal lattice. That's the pieces of crystal arranged in a continuing lattice, okay? Grain boundary is essentially the areas where those pieces of lattice fit up against each other. And the grain structure refers to how these grains fit together, okay? A single grain is always going to have the same crystal structure across it. When we start making alloys and we start mixing metals together, we can force different grains of different crystal structures of different metals to come together. but we can't change that one grain is a single type of crystal. Okay? So when we talk about our grain structure, how these grains fit together is essentially what we're discussing. And each grain will always be the same material with the same crystal structure across it. Does that make sense? Okay. How the grains are arranged and how they fit together can vary. We can have a random orientation, which essentially means that there's no alignment with the external boundaries of the metal. They're just random, okay? And you can force this type of orientation when you're processing a metal by doing something called cross-rolling. So when you roll out metal sheets, how you apply the pressure determines our grain structure, right? And so you'll hear terms like cold pressed or hot pressed. And as part of that, there's going to be a rolling of the metal together in sheets. All of that is done in order to control how the grains fit together, okay? And whether that's because you need multiple metals to fit together or you need a particular orientation, kind of depends on why you're making that metal. But these can be controlled by how we produce it, okay? Preferred orientation is essentially going to orient the grains in a particular direction based on the outer edge of the metal, right? So if we have a sheet of metal and we want the grains to run parallel to the long edges or parallel to the short edges, when we press and roll our metal that we're making, we're going to put pressure in a certain direction. And that's going to form a grain boundary with a preferred orientation. This is usually the preferred orientation, right? It's usually the desirable structure we want. But there are certain specific applications where this is very bad. Preferred orientation in uranium metal fuel is going to result in catastrophic expansion of certain dimensions at the temperatures we have in a nuclear reactor, right? Because metals expand and contract in heat and cold. And if it's going to expand all in one direction because of the preferred orientation, it's going to essentially grow out of its cladding, bust open its containment, and enter the coolant, right? It's not going to be contained inside its cladding, inside its fuel elements anymore, or fuel funnel. So most of the time, most applications are seeking a preferred orientation, but be aware there's going to be certain instances where the properties of that preferred orientation grain structure are undesirable. So, where we're going from here. We're going to learn how grain structure and arrangement affect the metal as it responds to the different stresses we have in the reactor, right? So creep, we're going to talk about this. It's permanent deformation of the grain structure. And you guys don't have to write these definitions down now, just kind of giving you a plan so you know why we learned about this today. And then small grain size, large grain size, they affect the properties of our metal, right? So tensile strength, ductility, our ability to maintain a structure at high temperature or resist irradiation assisted stress corrosion cracking. All of these issues can be traced back to what's happening at the grain and grain boundary. Therefore, how we structure that is important to how well these metals hold up to those conditions. Any questions? Okay, so I'm going to end the Zoom video for everybody who's in class. I'm going to go get our little atomic structure, our crystal model kit, and we're going to try and put together some body-centered cubic and other crystal structures. So you can kind of have that visualization and understand it. So as we talk about these different stressors in the metal, you kind of understand what our concerns are. Yes, Porter, for the components lab today, your groups will go downstairs to Evan's area. Whoever's not doing the lab, that group will be in the classroom with me, and we're going to do a review for the exam in components class. That's next week. It's next Monday. So either be in the classroom or on Zoom, or be in the lab for components class. Anyone online have another question? Sam, do you want to ask now, or do you want to meet later?
I'll just ask you when I go to class.
Okay. What were you going to ask, Caden?
So on that review, does that count as the lab grade? If we do the review instead?
No, you still have to do the lab.
Oh, dang it.
I'll be, I'll be in the classroom both hours doing the same review, so each group gets a chance to do the lab and do the review.
Oh, okay.
So while you're in lab, the other group will be with me reviewing, and then you guys will switch. Does that make sense?
So my lab group is the first lab group, so I'll come during that time and just stay for the review?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. All right, guys. I'm going to end the Zoom video. We're going to do that exercise in class. Those of you who want to use the modeling kit, you think that would be a good exercise for you, it's going to be on the shelf in here in the classroom for a little while. So feel free to pull it out and ask anybody who is in class to kind of show you what we did, if you think it will help you. All right. See you guys at components class.